The question we can all ask ourselves when we are in the midst of a fork in the road. Not the question of what do I get, but the question of what do I become?
We are back with another daily reflection on the Daily Vedantic, and today's reflection, I recorded it while we were traveling. So all you lucky listeners will get to listen to the voice note on this episode. Let's get into it. We are back with another reflection on the Daily Vedantic. Today's reflection comes from a conversation I had with a friend recently. And this conversation comes up quite often, especially when people are wondering if they should found their own business. Many of my friends are founders. I'd say the majority of my friends are founders because of the startup ecosystem, being an investor in so many startups, and that being a big part of my day job is investing in founders, startups, investing in their careers, their development, helping them all along the way from everything logistical in building startups and companies after 17 years of building them and seeing everything there is to see outside of an IPO, seeing nearly everything there is to see in building a startup. And I say that really just thinking about all the mistakes that I made. I made basically every mistake under the sun. And so you end up being quite helpful to those that are in the midst of their own mistakes or in the midst of trying to avoid the ones that you've made. But there are a handful of conversations that I have with friends that are thinking that they should become founders. And I'm always encouraging when it comes to that. Swami has a concept that he thinks everybody should be a freelancer, that everybody should start their own thing, be their own boss, because when we are not our own bosses, when we've got 3 layers above us, or even if you're the right-hand person to the CEO, you end up having to adopt their value system in all kinds of subtle and super explicit ways. Start caring about the Lakers game, because that's office water cooler talk. Start caring about this side of the business. Maybe you get in some gray areas, some gray territories on things ethically because, there's a greater good generating the profits that keep people's jobs stable and afloat. You end up adopting your superior's value systems in so many cases that said the clearest and cleanest way to avoid that is to be a freelancer. You might start your own business and have 30, 50, 100 employees, 1,000, 100,000 employees. Or you might be a freelancer that says, you know what, I'm a good marketer, but I'm going to be a freelancer across 2 or 3 different companies or work and start my own agency so that you can be free of just catching other people's value systems like a cold. And when this conversation comes up, I always bring it back to something philosophical and practical. And that is when you have a fork in the road, you might think it's about what do I get? And option A and this career path. What do I get in option B and that career path? Maybe even you might even think you're being generous and thinking, well, what does my family get? What do those around me get? Because I'm going to give to charity. What do I get in option A? And what would we all get in option B? The 20th century psychologist and philosopher Erich Fromm talk about this in terms of a confusion of mode of having and mode of being. Or that fork in the road, it's the wrong question for that fork in the road to ask, well, what do I get in option A and what do I get in option B? Our greatest gift to ourselves and to our community is not what do you get. It's what do you become? So I reorient the conversation with a friend away from what do you get to what do you become in either choice? Who would you rather become? The person 5 years into option A or the person 5 years into option B? actually has nothing to do with what you get. This ties into the Vedantic principle that the most important work we do for others, the most important thing we do for others, is the work that we do on ourselves. Flies in the face of most of our traditions that say, well, generosity is all about giving material wealth away. And yet, throughout history, there have been people that have given materially, even given physically, then they're actually taking far more than what they were giving. Unwise actions destroy worlds, as Swamiji says. There are countless examples in the nonprofit realm where actually what was being given destroyed worlds. Governmental aid over the last 65 years, $2 trillion, over $2 trillion being given to poor nations, have had countless examples where that blows up in the country's face, where they actually arrest their development as a country versus actually benefit from it. Nearly all of the 30 poorest countries from 1972 to 2002, the same poorest countries 30 years later. My degrees in, it's what I studied in undergrad, was development economics. And one of the things that you learn about is how the majority of organizational and governmental aid went to a subset of countries that 30 years later were still the poorest countries in the world. And the countries that climbed out of the 30 poorest countries in the world. The one shining example that climbed out from 1972 to 2002 was China. And how much governmental organizational aid did they receive during those 30 years? $0. Another canonical example is Typhoid Mary, a cook that thought she was feeding those around her. Was working tirelessly to feed and nourish those around her, and unknowingly was giving everyone around her typhoid over the course of nearly a decade. This idea that the highest form of giving is through giving externally is contrasted with the wisdom within Vedanta that the highest form of generosity, the most important work we do for others, family, coworkers, community, country, humanity at large, is the work that we do on ourselves. So instead of the question of what do you get in a fork in the road, the question is, who do you become? And in that question, option A or option B, a fork in the road in any decision in life, reorient towards which path is going to provide you with the path that allows you to become who you know you want to become. It's not about what do I get. It's not a mode of having. It's a mode of being that not only is a reorientation of that question, it's what we ultimately want. Happiness is not a mode of having. That is our great confusion. We think, oh, happiness is in having this or that, having just a little bit more. But happiness is a mode, a state of being. And you get to that state of being through a journey of becoming. So if you're in a fork in the road today, tomorrow, a month from now, or if you might have a friend that's in a fork in the road, their lives or their careers, you can send them this episode to reorient from this question of what do I get to the far more powerful for yourself, for you as an individual, and in addition, for your community at large. Reorient towards the right question. The question we can all ask ourselves when we're in the midst of a fork in the road. Not the question of what do I get, but the question of What do I become?
And that was today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.